I never thought a single punch could destroy the career I'd built with blood and sweat over 7 years. But I certainly never imagined that same punch would become the weapon that brought an entire empire crashing down. They say violence is never the answer. They're wrong. Sometimes, when the system is rigged and justice wears a $3,000 suit, violence is the only language they understand. This is the story of how I lost everything for hitting the CEO's son. And how he lost everything for being exactly that, the CEO's son. My name is Laura McKinney. And until 3 months ago, I believed hard work could overcome anything. 32 years old, born and raised in a small Kansas town where the tallest building was the grain elevator. I'd clawed my way up from nothing to something in Brighton City's gleaming towers. 7 years at Nexora Dynamics had taught me that meritocracy was mostly myth. But I'd still managed to make myself indispensable, or so I thought. Nexora's headquarters occupied 40 floors of premium real estate in downtown Brighton. All glass and steel reaching toward a sky that always seemed just out of reach. The lobby alone cost more to maintain than my parents' house was worth. Italian marble, commissioned sculptures, water features that served no purpose except to remind visitors they were entering a different world. One where money wasn't just power, it was atmosphere. I'd arrived here with a computer science degree from a state school nobody had heard of and determination that bordered on desperation. No connections, no trust fund, no safety net except my own ability to outwork everyone around me. While my colleagues discussed their weekend trips to the Hamptons, I was pulling 14-hour days, learning every system, every process, every shortcut that could give me an edge. The AI Solutions division where I worked was Nexora's crown jewel, developing enterprise software that could predict market trends, optimize supply chains, and essentially print money for Fortune 500 companies. I'd started as a junior developer, writing code that nobody else wanted to touch, debugging legacy systems that made grown engineers cry. But I was good at it, better than good. I could see patterns others missed. Find elegant solutions to problems that had stumped teams for months. By year 3, I was leading projects. By year 5, I was managing entire product launches. The performance reviews came back glowing, quarter after quarter, exceptional contributor. Natural leader. Critical to team success. My salary had tripled, though it still couldn't buy me the respect that came free with the right last name. The office politics at Nexora were more complex than any algorithm I'd ever untangled. Beneath the progressive corporate speak about diversity and equal opportunity ran deeper currents. Old money, old boys clubs, old ways of deciding who belonged and who was merely tolerated. I navigated it all with careful precision, never too aggressive, never too passive. Always professional even when professional meant swallowing insults disguised as jokes. I loved the work itself, though. There was something pure about code. It didn't care where you came from or who your father was. It either worked or it didn't. The solutions I built were elegant, efficient, and they saved companies millions. That should have been enough. In any fair system, it would have been enough. But Nexora Dynamics wasn't a fair system. It was a kingdom dressed up as a corporation, and every kingdom needs its princes. The break room conversations told you everything you needed to know about how things really worked. Who got promoted despite mediocre performance, whose mistakes got buried, whose ideas got stolen and repackaged by someone with a better pedigree. I watched, I learned, and I adapted. I thought if I just worked hard enough, if I just proved myself indispensable enough, I could transcend the unwritten rules. Pride, that's what it was. Pure, stubborn. Kansas-bred pride that whispered I was different. I was special. I could beat the system by being too good to ignore. 3 months ago, I learned exactly how wrong I was. Ethan Doyle arrived on a Monday morning in February, when Brighton City was still wrapped in the kind of cold that made your bones ache. I remember because I'd been in the office since 6:30, preparing for a critical client presentation, when the email came through from Richard Doyle himself, our illustrious CEO. Please join me in welcoming Ethan to the Nexora family. He'll be joining us as Senior Project Director in the AI Solutions Division. Senior Project Director. The position I'd been working toward for 2 years. The position that had mysteriously disappeared from the internal job board just a week earlier. 27 years old, fresh MBA from Wharton. 0 days of actual work experience, unless you counted internships at Daddy's golf buddies' firms. Ethan walked into our department like he owned it, which technically, I suppose he did. Armani suit that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Watch that could fund a startup, and a smile that never reached his eyes. He had his father's sharp features, but none of the calculated intelligence that had built Nexora from nothing. Where Richard Doyle was a shark, Ethan was a remora, feeding off his father's success while contributing nothing but waste. The introduction meeting was a masterclass in corporate theater. Our department head, Marcus, practically genuflected as he introduced Ethan to the team. Ethan brings fresh perspectives from his extensive education, Marcus said, avoiding eye contact with those of us who'd been solving actual problems while Ethan was doing keg stands at business school. I'm not here because of my last name, Ethan announced within his first 5 minutes, a statement so laughably false that someone actually coughed to cover a snort. I'm here to revolutionize how we approach AI implementation. You'll find I have very specific ideas about efficiency. His specific ideas, as it turned out, consisted mainly of undermining everything we'd built. In meetings, he'd wait for me to present a solution, then dismiss it with phrases like, "That's adorable, but let me explain how it's actually done," before regurgitating something he'd clearly Googled 5 minutes earlier. When I corrected his technical errors, politely, always politely, his face would flush red. And he'd make some comment about territorial employees resistant to change. The contempt was never subtle. He'd interrupt me mid-sentence, assign me note-taking duties in meetings I was supposed to be leading, forward my emails to himself, and respond as if the ideas were his. "Laura, coffee for the client meeting," he'd say, not asking, just expecting. When I reminded him I was a senior developer, not an assistant, he'd laugh. "Team player, Laura. We're all about being team players here." The other men in the department got casual disrespect. But for me, there was something else, a particular venom reserved for women who forgot their place. "Did you get that outfit at Target?" he asked once, loud enough for the entire floor to hear. "It's cute how you try." Or during a technical discussion, "This is pretty complex stuff. Laura, maybe stick to the front-end work. Making things pretty, you know?" My colleagues saw it all. They shifted uncomfortably in their seats, avoided eye contact, offered sympathetic grimaces when Ethan wasn't looking. But nobody said anything. Nobody ever said anything. His last name was a force field that repelled accountability. The breaking point came during a meeting about a predictive analytics platform I'd been developing for 8 months. Ethan, who couldn't code his way out of a paper bag, stood at the whiteboard explaining his vision for the project. My algorithms, my architecture, my innovations, all wearing his name tag. "Excuse me," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "That's literally my code you're describing. I wrote every line of it." He turned to me with that snake smile. "It's called delegation. Laura, I provide the vision, you provide the typing. That's why I'm management and you're..." He paused, savoring it. "Support staff?" The room went silent. Even Marcus looked uncomfortable. But Ethan just kept smiling, waiting for me to accept my place in his carefully ordered world where merit meant nothing and birthright meant everything. The Meridian contract was worth $43 million. I'd nurtured that relationship for 18 months, flying to Seattle every other week, sitting through endless rounds of negotiations, rebuilding our entire demonstration platform 3 times to meet their exact specifications. When Meridian CTO finally said yes, it was my name on the paperwork, my solutions they were buying, my reputation that had sealed the deal. The Thursday it happened started like any other. I was reviewing the final implementation timeline when Marcus called an emergency all-hands meeting. Unusual, but not unheard of. I grabbed my laptop and headed to the conference room, finding it already packed. Ethan stood at the front, positively glowing. "I wanted to share some incredible news," he began. and my stomach dropped. Through my leadership and strategic vision, we've successfully secured the Meridian contract. The words hit me like ice water. I sat frozen as he detailed his negotiation strategy, his technical innovations, his relationship building. He was reading from my notes, using my slides, claiming my victories. 18 months of my life repackaged as his triumph. Wait, I heard myself say, standing up, every head turned. That's my project. I've been leading the Meridian account since. Laura. Ethan cut me off, his voice dripping condescension. I know you've been very helpful with some of the support tasks, but let's not overstate your role. This was a director-level initiative. Support tasks? The words came out louder than I intended. I wrote every line of code in that platform. I flew to Seattle 23 times. Their CTO doesn't even know your name. His face reddened. You seem confused about how hierarchy works. When support staff contribute to a director's project, the director owns the outcome. That's basic business structure. You're a liar. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus shifted nervously. My colleagues studied their phones. But I was past caring. You're a pathetic, incompetent liar who wouldn't know innovative code if it compiled itself and did a tap dance. Ethan's mask finally slipped. You bitter little nobody, he snarled, stepping toward me. You think because you can write some scripts, you matter? You're replaceable. Any code monkey fresh out of community college could do your job. The only reason you're even here is because we needed to fill a diversity quota. The room gasped. Even by Nixora standards, he'd crossed a line, but he wasn't done. You want to know the truth, Laura? Women like you, angry, aggressive, probably on your period half the time, you're exactly why tech companies think twice about hiring females. You can't handle the pressure. You make everything personal. And then you wonder why you're stuck in support roles. I stood up, my hands shaking. Take it back. He laughed, actually laughed. Or what? You'll cry? File a complaint with HR? He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and suffocating. Let me explain reality. Since you seem confused, I'm Richard Doyle's son. You're nobody's daughter. I matter. You don't. Last chance, I said quietly. Apologize. Apologize? He grabbed my wrist, hard, pulling me toward him. You should be apologizing to me, you ungrateful. The sound of my fist connecting with his jaw was the most satisfying thing I'd ever heard. Crack, clean, and sharp. Like good code executing perfectly. Ethan went down hard, blood streaming from his nose, his perfect smile, finally, blessedly shattered. The conference room erupted. Someone screamed, Marcus was shouting, 2 people were filming on their phones. Ethan was on the floor, cupping his face, making sounds somewhere between rage and disbelief. I looked down at my hand, knuckles already swelling, probably broken, definitely worth it. 7 years of professionalism, of measured responses, of swallowing insults and smiling through humiliation, all gone in one glorious second of pure, unfiltered justice. You're done. Ethan gasped through the blood. You're so done. I looked around the room at my colleagues, some shocked, some secretly pleased, all of them knowing exactly who was telling the truth about the Meridian contract. Not one of them would say it out loud. Yeah, I said, strangely calm. Probably, but at least I'm not bleeding on the floor like a... Marcus grabbed my arm. Laura, you need to leave, now. Security arrived within 3 minutes. 2 guards I'd smiled at every morning for 7 years wouldn't meet my eyes as they escorted me to a small, windowless room on the 2nd floor. Wait here, one mumbled, looking genuinely apologetic. HR and legal are coming. I sat in that beige prison for 2 hours, my knuckles throbbing, replaying the moment over and over. Not with regret. God, no. But with a kind of disbelief that I'd finally done it. Finally said, no. Finally fought back. The door opened. Richard Doyle himself walked in, followed by the head of HR and someone from legal whose name I'd never bothered to learn. The CEO of Nexora Dynamics, a man who'd spoken to me exactly twice in 7 years, was here to personally fire me. I suppose I should have felt honored. Richard Doyle was everything his son pretended to be: sharp, calculating, genuinely brilliant in that sociopathic way that builds empires. He sat across from me, his face unreadable, and studied me like I was a bug. He was deciding whether to squash or simply flick away. "Ms. McKinney," he began, his voice perfectly neutral. "You assaulted my son. Your son assaulted me first. He grabbed me. 20 witnesses saw it. 20 witnesses saw you break his nose. The grabbing part seems unclear." I laughed, bitter and short. Unclear. Right. Like how it's unclear who really secured the Meridian contract. His eye twitched. The only sign I'd hit a nerve. "What's clear is that you violated Nexora's zero-tolerance violence policy. The decision has been made. You're terminated. Effective immediately." "What about Ethan? He physically grabbed me. He created a hostile work environment. He's been stealing credit for months." "Ethan has been placed on temporary administrative leave pending a review." The lie rolled off his tongue like water. However, his actions, whatever they may have been, don't excuse yours. Violence is never acceptable at Nexora. The HR head slid a document across the table. "This is your termination agreement. You'll receive 2 weeks severance." 7 years, I interrupted. 7 years of exceptional reviews. And I get 2 weeks? Given the circumstances, Richard continued. 2 weeks is generous. Sign the agreement, which includes a non-disclosure clause about today's events, and we can all move forward. I read the document. It was a gag order disguised as severance. Sign here, take your pennies, and never speak about what really happened. And if I don't sign, then you get nothing, and we pursue criminal charges for assault. Your choice. The legal representative spoke up. "You should also know that several employees have already provided statements supporting the company's version of events." Of course they had. Their mortgages, their children's college funds, their entire futures depended on staying in Richard Doyle's good graces. I couldn't even blame them. I signed. What else could I do? I had $8,000 in savings and a mortgage of my own. I couldn't afford a legal battle against Nexora's army of lawyers. "You have 30 minutes to clear your desk," HR said. "Security will accompany you." The walk to my desk was the longest of my life. Word had already spread. The entire floor watched as I packed 7 years into a cardboard box. My code notebooks, my coffee mug with the cartoon dinosaur, the tiny succulent I'd managed to keep alive despite the fluorescent lights. The Meridian project files stayed behind. Officially company property, though every innovation in them had come from my mind. Some colleagues wouldn't look at me. Others offered small, sad smiles, the kind you give someone at a funeral. Janine from accounting whispered, "I'm sorry," as I passed. Tom from development mouthed, "That was awesome," when the guards weren't looking. But nobody stood up, nobody spoke out, nobody was willing to risk their own neck for the truth. Marcus appeared as I was leaving. "Laura, I wish things had gone differently." "No, you don't," I said, adjusting the box in my arms. "You wish things had gone quietly? There's a difference." At the elevator, one of the guards finally spoke. "For what it's worth," he said quietly, "everybody knows that Meridian deal was yours. Everybody knows what that kid is. But knowing and saying are different things, aren't they?" He looked away. The elevator doors closed. I walked out of Nexora Dynamics at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday afternoon, holding a pathetic box and a swollen hand, my career in ruins. Behind me, 40 floors of glass and steel continued reaching toward the sky, indifferent to the small injustice that had just occurred within. The truly sick part? Ethan would be back at his desk by Monday, his nose bandaged but his position secure. The CEO's son had been punched. The nobody from Kansas had been erased. That's how the system works. That's how it always works. Until it doesn't. The first week was the worst. I'd wake up at 5:30 a.m., muscle memory preparing for a commute that no longer existed. I'd reach for my laptop to check emails that weren't coming. The silence of my apartment felt oppressive, accusatory, like the walls themselves were asking what the hell I'd done. My phone became toxic. The story had leaked, of course. Nothing stays secret in Brighton City's tech scene. But the version that spread wasn't mine. According to LinkedIn whispers and Reddit threads, a female developer with anger management issues had violently attacked a colleague in an unprovoked outburst. Someone had even posted a photo of Ethan's bandaged face with the caption, "This is what workplace violence looks like." The comments were a masterclass in misogyny. Probably PMSing. This is why emotional females shouldn't be in high-stress positions. Bet she thought she deserved a promotion and snapped when she didn't get it. My name wasn't mentioned. Nixora's lawyers had seen to that. But anyone who mattered knew exactly who they were discussing. My bank account became a countdown clock. $8,000 minus mortgage, minus utilities, minus the food I could barely bring myself to eat. I applied for jobs with the mechanical desperation of someone treading water. 50 applications in the first week, 12 responses. 0 interviews once they figured out who I was. "We've decided to go with a candidate who's a better cultural fit," became the refrain. Cultural fit, code for, we Googled you and don't want the drama. By week 3, I was considering selling my car. By week 4, I was calculating how many months I could survive on credit cards. The American dream, it turns out, is remarkably fragile. One punch, and 7 years of building becomes 3 months of drowning. I started drinking, not dramatically, not bottles of whiskey and crying on the floor, just a glass of wine at lunch that became 2, then 3, just something to blur the edges of a reality that had become unbearably sharp. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, would look at me with pity when I stumbled past her door at 2 p.m. Clearly drunk, clearly lost. The lowest point came on a Tuesday. I was standing in my kitchen, holding an eviction warning, 2 months behind on mortgage, when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Laura, this is Jennifer Wu. I used to work at Nexora." The name was vaguely familiar. "Okay?" "I left 2 years ago. Similar circumstances." Ethan grabbed my ass at a company party. When I reported it, I was suddenly not meeting performance standards despite 3 years of stellar reviews. My hand tightened on the phone. "Why are you calling me?" "Because you're not alone. There are 7 of us that I know of. 7 women Ethan harassed, assaulted, or got fired when we wouldn't play along. We have a group chat. We call ourselves the Ethan Survivors Club." I laughed. Dark, bitter. Cute name. "Does it come with health insurance? Because I'm about to lose mine." "It comes with something better. Evidence." That word hung in the air like a lifeline. What kind of evidence? Emails, recordings, HR complaints that mysteriously disappeared. Some of us were smarter than you. No offense. We documented everything. We've been waiting for someone brave enough to throw the first punch. Literally, in your case. And what good does evidence do? Richard Doyle owns half this city. Richard Doyle is CEO, not king. Nexora has a board, shareholders. The Meridian contract you secured? That's public now. Investors are very interested in knowing who really delivered $43 million in revenue. For the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. "You want to take them down?" "No. Laura, we want you to take them down. You're the one with nothing left to lose." She was right. I was already dead in the water professionally. My reputation was destroyed, my savings depleted, my future a giant question mark. What did I have to lose that hadn't already been taken? "Send me everything," I said. That night, I poured the wine down the sink and opened my laptop. 7 women had sent me their stories, their evidence, their rage compressed into PDF files and audio recordings. Ethan hadn't just stolen credit and thrown tantrums. He was a predator with a pattern, protected by his father's money and everyone's fear. But more interesting were the financial documents one woman had copied before leaving. Ethan had been given control of project budgets, and the numbers didn't add up. Hundreds of thousands in consulting fees to companies that didn't seem to exist. Development costs that doubled whenever Ethan was involved. I wasn't just looking at harassment and assault, I was looking at fraud. For the first time since that Thursday afternoon, I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile that would have scared me if I'd seen it in a mirror. They'd taken everything from me by following the rules. So I was going to destroy them by following the rules too. Just not the ones they expected. The nobody from Kansas was about to remind them that in code, as in life, every system has vulnerabilities. You just have to know where to look. The evidence was damning, but evidence alone doesn't bring down kingdoms. You need someone willing to tell the story. That's when I remembered Megan Torres. Megan was a freelance investigative journalist who'd broken 3 major corporate scandals in the past 5 years. More importantly, she had a personal vendetta against untouchable rich kids. Her own career at the Washington Post had been derailed when she'd refused a senator's son's advances. I found her contact through a mutual connection and sent a carefully worded email. She called within an hour. Laura McKinney, the woman who punched Ethan Doyle. You're either brave or stupid. Probably both. But I have something you'll want to see. We met at a diner outside the city, the kind of place where nobody from Nexora's world would ever venture. I showed her everything, the testimonies, the financial irregularities, the pattern of abuse. She reviewed it with the focused intensity of a hunter who'd just caught scent of prey. This is good, she said finally. But it's not enough. The harassment stuff, they'll bury with settlements. The financial fraud, that's interesting. But I need more. Real documentation, not just suspicions. I can't access Nexora's systems anymore. No, but someone can. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through contacts. Ever heard of Binary Liberation? The hacktivist group? They prefer digital justice advocates. They've been watching Nexora for years, something about monopolistic practices and worker exploitation. They might be interested in a collaboration. It took 2 weeks to make contact. Binary Liberation didn't trust easily, but the Ethan Survivors Club testimonies opened doors. They already had partial access to Nexora's servers, not enough to cause damage, but enough to observe. What they found confirmed our suspicions, and then some. Ethan hadn't just been skimming project budgets. He'd been running an entire shadow operation, creating shell companies that billed Nexora for fictitious services. The money went straight to his personal accounts, nearly $3 million over 2 years. His father either didn't know or didn't care. Too busy empire building to notice his son was bleeding the company dry. But the real gold mine was the emails. Hundreds of messages between Ethan and Marcus discussing how to handle problem employees like me. One particularly damning thread from the day before the Meridian presentation. McKinney's becoming an issue. She actually thinks she deserves credit. Let her present to Meridian. Once the contract's signed, we'll reassign the project to you. If she complains, she's not a team player. And if she fights back? Then she's hysterical. Either way, problem solved. While Megan worked on the story, I focused on the shareholders. Nexora was publicly traded, and institutional investors don't like fraud. I created anonymous packages, detailed financial analyses showing how Ethan's incompetence and embezzlement were affecting stock value. The Meridian contract I'd secured was being mismanaged under Ethan's leadership, already showing delays and budget overruns. I sent these packages to the 5 largest shareholders, including Blackstone Capital, which owned 12% of Nexora. The subject line was simple: your investment is being stolen. The final piece was the board of directors. 9 members, including Richard Doyle. But boards have a fiduciary duty to shareholders. And when those shareholders start asking questions, boards have to listen. I researched each member, found the 2 with reputations for actual integrity: Patricia Huang, a former federal prosecutor, and David Kemper, who'd blown the whistle on his own company years ago. They received special packages, including audio recordings Jennifer Wu had made of Ethan's harassment, financial documents showing the fraud, and a simple question: How long before this becomes your liability? The chess pieces were in place. Megan had her story ready, waiting for the perfect moment to publish. The shareholders were asking uncomfortable questions. The board was getting nervous. Binary Liberation was prepared to release the emails if needed. But I needed one more thing, a catalyst, something that would make this impossible to ignore or bury. That's when I learned about the annual investors' meeting. 300 of Nexora's biggest stakeholders, the entire board, and senior management, all in one room. Richard Doyle would present the year's achievements, including the Meridian contract. Ethan would be there, playing the role of successful executive. The meeting was in 3 weeks. Public companies are required to allow shareholder attendance, and technically, I still owned 50 shares of Nexora stock, bought through the employee purchase program, forgotten in my old 401k. I wasn't just a disgruntled former employee anymore. I was a shareholder with evidence of fraud. And I had every right to ask questions during the Q&A session. The plan was simple. Stand up in that room full of money and power and tell the truth. Let Megan's article drop simultaneously. Watch the empire crack under the weight of its own corruption. They'd taken everything from me according to their rules. Now I was going to destroy them according to those same rules. The system that had protected them was about to become the weapon that brought them down. The nobody from Kansas was done being nobody. It was time to be somebody's worst nightmare. The Brighton City Convention Center had never felt more electric. 300 of the wealthiest investors in tech were settling into their seats, champagne and small talk flowing. I sat in the back row, my 50 shares making me the smallest fish in an ocean of whales. I'd worn my best suit, the one I'd bought for the Meridian presentation, and kept my head down as Richard Doyle took the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, Nexora has had an exceptional year, he began, his voice carrying that particular confidence of someone who'd never been challenged. Our AI division, led by my son Ethan, secured the landmark Meridian contract. That was my cue. I stood up. Point of order, I called out, my voice cutting through his presentation. Every head turned. Richard's face went rigid as he recognized me. Ms. McKinney, you're out of order. Security. I'm a shareholder, I said, holding up my documentation. I have the right to address concerns about fraud and mismanagement that's costing this company millions. The word fraud rippled through the room like a stone dropped in still water. Security hesitated. Patricia Huang, the former prosecutor on the board, held up her hand to stop them. Let her speak, Patricia said. If there's fraud, we have a fiduciary duty to hear it. Richard's jaw clenched. 5 minutes. I walked to the front, my phone already sending the signal to Megan. Her article would be live in 60 seconds. My name is Laura McKinney. I wrote every line of code that secured the Meridian contract. Ethan Doyle stole that credit, just like he's stolen $3 million through fraudulent consulting fees to shell companies. Gasps. Phones starting to buzz as Megan's article hit. CEO's son embezzles millions while father watches. That's slander, Ethan started, standing up from his front row seat. It's documented, I continued, pulling up slides on my phone, mirroring to the presentation screen. Binary Liberation had made sure I'd have access. Here are the invoices. Here are the shell companies. Here are the bank records. The room erupted. Shareholders were on their feet, shouting questions. Richard was trying to restore order. But chaos had already taken hold. Then the emails started displaying on screen. The conspiracy to discredit me, the plans to steal credit, the casual discrimination. This is illegal, Richard roared. You're in violation of your NDA. My NDA prevents me from discussing my termination, I said calmly. It says nothing about discussing ongoing fraud as a concerned shareholder. David Kemper, the whistleblower board member, was standing now. Mr. Doyle, is any of this true? Of course not. This is a disgruntled employee. Then you won't mind an independent audit? Patricia Huang asked. Immediate and comprehensive? The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face had gone from red to white. Ethan was backing toward the exit, But reporters Megan had brought friends were already blocking his path. Motion for an emergency board meeting, Patricia announced. All in favor of suspending Ethan Doyle pending investigation? 7 hands went up. Only Richard and 1 other abstained. Motion carried. But it wasn't over. Blackstone Capital's representative stood. We're also calling for a vote of no confidence in Richard Doyle's leadership, a CEO who allows this level of corruption. You can't, Richard started. We own 12% of this company. The representative cut him off. Combined with the shares of others here who've already contacted us, we have enough to force a special election. The kingdom was crumbling in real time. Richard looked at Ethan with something between rage and disgust. Ethan, for his part, was trying to speak, but no one was listening. His Armani suit couldn't protect him now. His last name had become Poison. You destroyed everything, Ethan shouted at me over the chaos. You vindictive bitch! You destroyed everything! No, I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. I documented everything. You destroyed yourself. The meeting devolved into controlled chaos. Lawyers being called, emergency sessions being scheduled, reporters shouting questions. Through it all, I stood perfectly still, watching 7 years of humiliation transform into perfect vindication. By 3 p.m., both Doyles had been escorted from the building. By 4 p.m., the board had announced Ethan's termination for cause and Richard's voluntary resignation pending transition. By 5 p.m., Nixora's stock had dropped 20%, and criminal investigations had been announced. The headline on every tech blog by evening was beautiful in its simplicity. CEO's son fired for being CEO's son after whistleblower reveals millions in fraud. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. I'd been fired for punching him. He'd been fired for being exactly what he'd always claimed was his greatest asset, Richard Doyle's son. The nepotism that had protected him had become the liability no company could afford. The parking garage at Nixora was nearly empty at 7 p.m. I stood by my car, holding a box, not of my belongings this time, but of evidence I no longer needed. The FBI had copies of everything. The Ethan Survivors Club had found their closure. Megan Torres had her Pulitzer-worthy story. I heard footsteps echoing off concrete. Ethan Doyle emerged from the shadows, looking nothing like the prince who'd walked into our department 9 months ago. His suit was wrinkled, his face gaunt, the bandage from his nose long gone, but the slight crook in it permanent. My signature on his face. Come to gloat? He asked, his voice hollow. No, just picking up my final shareholder documents. He laughed, bitter and broken. Shareholder, 50 fucking shares brought down everything my father built. Your father's still rich. He'll land somewhere else. You, on the other hand, I let it hang. I'm facing federal charges. 3 to 5 years, my lawyer says, if I'm lucky. He looked at me with something that might have been respect if it hadn't been poisoned with hate. You really planned everything, didn't you? I didn't plan for you to steal $3 million. That was all you. I was going to pay it back. No, you weren't. We stood there in the growing darkness, predator and prey with their roles finally reversed. He looked smaller now, deflated, just another privileged kid who discovered the world had teeth. You know what the funny thing is? He said. I actually believed I deserved it all. The position, the money, the credit. I thought being Richard Doyle's son meant I was special. And now? Now I'm nobody. Just another criminal with a famous name. He started walking away, then stopped. That punch. Did it feel as good as you thought it would? Better, I said honestly. It felt like justice. He disappeared into the darkness. I never saw him again. The next morning, I sat in my apartment, scrolling through job offers. 12 companies had reached out overnight, suddenly very interested in the woman who'd brought down Nixora's corruption. The Meridian contract had been transferred to a new firm, and they wanted me to lead the implementation, at twice my old salary. Jennifer Wu called. The Ethan Survivors Club is having drinks tonight. Victory celebration. You in? I'll think about it. But I didn't go. Instead, I sat on my balcony, watching Brighton City's lights flicker like synapses in some vast neural network. The city looked the same, but everything had changed. The towers still reached toward the sky, but now I knew they could fall. The powerful still wore their $3,000 suits, but now I knew they could bleed. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Ethan Doyle pleads guilty to embezzlement, faces 3 years in federal prison. I didn't smile, didn't celebrate, just felt a quiet satisfaction, like completing a particularly complex piece of code. The system had worked, finally, but only because I'd forced it to. Only because I'd been willing to lose everything to make it work. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. They're wrong. Revenge is best served according to the rules, the same rules they use to crush you, turn their weapons against them, make their system eat its own. I closed my eyes and thought about that moment, my fist connecting with Ethan's jaw, the crack of bone, the shock on his face. Violence isn't the answer, they say. But sometimes, violence is the question. And sometimes, the answer is yes. The nobody from Kansas had won. Not because I was special, not because the universe is fair, but because I was willing to punch back when punching back cost everything. And in the end, that made all the difference. My name is Laura McKinney. I was fired for beating the CEO's son. He was fired for being the CEO's son. And somewhere in that cosmic irony lies a truth about power, justice, and the price of dignity in America's glass towers. The meritocracy is a myth, but every myth can be shattered. You just need the right fist. Thank you so much for listening to this story of corporate revenge and justice. I'm curious, where are you listening to this story from? Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this tale of standing up to power resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Laura's situation? I'd love to hear your perspective on workplace injustice and fighting back.